IT Nation Wise Up, podcast that skips the sales pitch and brings you real insights and strategies to help your business. We're your hosts, Matt Topper
and Vicki Bruns.
And we are thrilled to have you join us.
This is not your typical podcast. Our goal is to make IT community experts more accessible to you by highlighting their experiences so we can learn and grow together. So if you're looking to stay ahead in the ever-evolving tech landscape, stick around as we dive into the topics that matter to you most.
So before we get started, just a quick reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe to IT Nation Wise Up so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dig in. Right, so our guest for today, Callen Sapien, and this is kind of a unique thing in that, Callen, you and I don't really know each other. I've heard of you, may have seen you around at events and such, but I'm going to be hearing your story for the first time. So can you start out by just doing an intro for us?
Yeah, Callen Sapien, as you just said. I'm the president over at MSPbots. I've been the president for about 9 months. Ended up joining after a couple stints in a couple private equity ones, including the ConnectWise for about 9 years. I did just about every job you can imagine over at ConnectWise while I was there. Started pretty early on. I left to work at a startup, sold that startup to Sophos. That startup was a DevSecOps automation startup that we were a little ahead of the curve in that 2019 MSPs didn't really care about automation in the same way that they care today, right? We weren't ready as an industry, and the maturity that's happened largely with the infusion of cash and the growth that we've had the last couple of years, and also the unemployment or the lack thereof unemployment in our space has really pushed it forward. So sold that company to Sophos, stuck around there for a little while, did my security chops, and then went back to automation and business intelligence and AI. Back to focusing on MSP because that's where I love to be, and so now I'm running the startup life again, which is really amazing. It's good to reconnect with wonderful colleagues. Vicki and I worked together for a very long time at ConnectWise, and I watched her just rocket ship out, and I had some amazing conversations as we went over the years. So it's wonderful.
I didn't pay him to say that either, folks. I promise you.
The problem with Vicki is she didn't listen to me for many times over the years, but I don't want to mansplain that. So, and when I say she didn't listen to me, it's about how amazing she was through every step of the way. So one she did pay me for.
I appreciate that. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, the company that Sophos acquired when you left ConnectWise. You mentioned that, we don't have to talk about the company name, but this totally just struck an idea in my head that we haven't talked about, Pitch It, which I think that company, that was the first winner of Pitch It, correct?
It was, and I always have to be careful because there was no impropriety. I was the kind of creator of Pitch It, right? And I was scrambling to get people to sign up, and a friend of mine had a startup that was focused on actually Ansible playbooks. A lot of people aren't familiar with Ansible. Ansible is a coding language for automation, largely focused on the enterprise space, but bringing that to MSPs in a visual manner. And they ended up winning. And the fun part too there is Gary Pica was sitting on the judgment council, and he was the first investor in Roost, which was a very similar product to the company that ended up winning 4 years ahead of schedule. So ConnectWise was, investing in the automation game for a long time, and ended up, maybe missing a little bit on that one, but it actually ended up working out because I think it paved the way for where the industry is going from an automation perspective.
Yeah, and just for our audience too, to really understand what Pitch It is, if this is the first time you're hearing it, it's a Shark Tank version of the MSP world where a lot of startups or maybe entrepreneurial spirits, maybe that's a better way to say it, that are coming in as vendors into the MSP world. They can really kind of go through this comprehensive cohort of, I believe, how long is it? 6 to 8 weeks long.
I think it's actually like 16 weeks long.
Oh, 6 weeks. 16 weeks.
It was 8, and now it's up to 16. It's like an accelerator, which is really nice without them taking any of the equity. So it truly is altruistic and driving the value in the space and innovation in the space.
Yeah, it's iterated, and we've iterated a lot through the years, and kind of made it more formalized. But I think that that's a really cool, it was a really cool start, right, for your journey outside of ConnectWise. But it really kind of, it's all cyclical. I feel like there's so many connections within the channel. It just, I don't know, continues to surprise me and amaze me how it's not even 6 degrees of separation. It's like 2 degrees, maybe.
2 degrees separation,
Absolutely.
channel separation.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about IT burnout, and dealing with burnout. So you mentioned, Callen, you're in the startup space, or you've run startups, and that can be a super one-way ticket to burnout, right? But even many of our viewers who are MSP owners, or even techs at MSPs, get down into this burnout hole. So what are your tips to avoid that? And actually, I have a slightly different question. What are your tips to start recognizing that if you're in it? I know for me, I didn't realize I was burned out until way after.
I think the first sign is just not enjoying what you are doing. I think we don't love. There was actually a fun debate. One of ConnectWise's old core values was love your work every day, and it's kind of a ridiculous notion, right? And actually, the person who realized it was a ridiculous notion was Arnie Bellini when we were talking about those things. And because he's like, well, I don't love it every day. If I'm the founder and I'm the owner and I'm the everything, how can I love my work every day? But the reality is more days than not, you tend to like what you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it, right? We're fortunate in the IT industry to often be pursuing one of our passions, right? Whether that's network technician, whether that's owner, whether that's entrepreneur, whether that's service manager. Most people that you meet in our industry are actually passionate about what they do. And when that passion starts to fade and you start to get frustrated with some of the more mundane things, that's where you start to kind of recognize that burnout. It's hard to see in yourself, and you can sometimes wonder why you don't have the energy or the fervor, or why you're delaying working that thing or responding back to someone. But when you see it regularly, I think that's a way of recognizing it. I think another way of recognizing it is looking to your peers or your friends or your spouse or significant other or your partner. They can often recognize it as well in you, and they won't always be as forthcoming and say, hey, why are you being an asshole? Why are you being a dick? Like why are you doing these things? They're often more along the lines of, like, hey, is everything all right? And if you're getting questions like that regularly, I think that's where I think we need to start to have some introspection and some mindfulness. For me, one of the ways that I do avoid it is I do practice mindfulness. It took a long time for me to get there. I was really angry in my early 20s, and I figured out how to get around that by taking 5 or 10 minutes every day to just kind of sit and either have some gratitude or have some introspection into what's been happening. Funny enough, we just talked about it, burnout, this morning, completely forgetting the topic of merit that we're talking about today. I was talking about it with my founder at MSPbots. He sold his MSP because he had burnout. He was tired of being frustrated in running a company, because he started the MSP because he had visions of, eventually having warm sandy beaches, a company that's running in an automated fashion, no boss, without realizing that his hundreds of customers became his boss. It's a thing that we as entrepreneurs think that we're going to have all this time, all this freedom as we get kind of sucked into it. And then on the other side of it, we realize that there's an entire company to run, or a department to run, or lots of responsibility, or lots of demanding people. I think one of the things you look at with people that choose to go into MSP versus being in an internal IT department or corporate IT is they think that they're going to have that ability to be their own boss. And in reality, when you're in corporate IT, when you're in internal IT, when you're working for a university, you typically have one boss, not every single one of your clients, not your vendors, not your employees. Your employees in some way become your bosses as well. And then from an individual perspective, there's a lot more demands when it comes to dealing with multiple different customers that want to be communicated with and treated in different ways. So I think for me, it's a recognition of what we're signing up for, and then it's being very mindful in what I'm thinking about. And that doesn't really talk about avoiding it, but that's the recognizing it and actually acknowledging it.
Yeah. So setting expectations up front, like your perception may not be the reality of what you're signing up for. So how do you more closely align those?
Absolutely. What is it? Happiness is expectations plus results. They say. So if your expectations or your results don't match, you're going to be unhappy. And that can really start to lead to, drain and burnout. So having those right expectations up front is a huge way of me avoiding burnout. I was on with a board member of mine today and kind of talking about that, because we're really trying to drill down and focus in just a couple areas. Startups want to run every direction really fast. We have to focus, and there's one area that's requiring my attention that is not in one of our focal points. And, the conversation that I had with him was, and the counsel he gave me was, as long as we're all aligned on the right expectations, and as long as the results get what we're expecting, nobody's going to be upset. And that's easy for me now to take a step back and say, okay, I don't have to solve this problem today. Even though it's a burning problem, even though it's critical to us solving it, the expectations aren't that this is going to be solved in this quarter. I can push it off to next quarter.
What do you do if you feel like you got there? I know for me, right? Once you get burned out, you're past the point sometimes where going on vacation can help it, or taking a long weekend can help it. How do you really recover from that?
It is, you're spot on. It's really hard to recover from burnout. Once you get it, you get apathy. Once you get apathy, everything starts to kind of suffer. You're demotivated. And I think it's discipline. You have to find a way to be disciplined to the vision or the mission that you were on, and have to try and reinvigorate your belief in that mission. I think burnout often comes from a lack of clarity around the vision, or losing that clarity. It starts to get fuzzy. Arlen Sorensen, talks about this all the time. Like, the vision has to be clear. And I think it's sitting down with whoever you need to in counseling, so that you can reinvigorate that passion for the vision, and being disciplined to complete a few things. Start building on what you've already been working on, and then complete a few things, and make sure that those things are moving you towards the direction that you already wanted to go in. And that's kind of where I would say I've been able to pull back out of a cycle, because I've definitely been burnt out before. My family has gone through some absolutely crazy things. I think a lot of people on the channel know my story, but I had a house that was falling apart that we moved into right after we sold Connectwise to Thoma Bravo. 3 weeks later, my son got diagnosed with leukemia. 9 months later, my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer. Everything started to come kind of back together. My house started falling apart again. I had to remove 2 walls. In that time is when I worked on and was part of the team that sold the startup to Sophos. Now I'm integrating into a new company, working those things through. And then the slowdown in the industry hit, right? So then now we're figuring out what are we going to do? And so in that time, I definitely experienced burnout. And what I did is I chose a mission, I chose a vision that was a thing I could dedicate towards. And then I just got things done that helped move me forward.
Yeah. I feel like, isn't it true that when you have a crisis that's happening, or burnout that's happening in one aspect of your life, if it's like your career or if it's personal, you can almost kind of look to the others sometimes to help recharge you. But to your point, you had literally things happening across all ends of the spectrum in your life. And so, yeah, where do you find solace or like energy to be able to come back to the table to fight the good fight, So what are some of the ways that you were able to get through all of those personal and business crises that were happening all at once?
I think I'll go back to the mindfulness, right? Remembering that I once found joy or contentment in that. I think that's another thing too. Once you experience burnout, you're feeling very discontent with your situation, and you're wanting to change things, sometimes for the sake of change. I think that pursuit of happiness is a very noble cause, but I think we also have to be okay with being content for a little while too, because content is better than depressed. Content is better than burnt out. Content is better than de-energized, right? So for me, when everything was on fire, I realized that in order to be okay and get things done, I just had to be content. I didn't have to actually expect that I was going to, hit nirvana. I just wanted to be content. I didn't need to be happy. Then as things started to get to where I saw a path here, I saw a path there, I made those little progress, and had discipline in that progress. Just get up and do the thing. Do the thing again, do the thing again. And with that, I was able to unlock and get over some of those areas, and then start to open myself up to some happiness again, and chasing some of that happiness. So I'm an absurdist by heart, which is, an offshoot of nihilism. And the other thing that definitely helps me is occasionally reminding myself, and this doesn't work for everybody, but of the insignificance of the things that we are trying to pursue. And the thing about absurdism is, with nihilism, nothing means anything because we're so insignificant, right? So why do anything? With absurdism, you actually apply a secondary meaning, which is, well, I care about this thing. I have consciousness. So I believe there's meaning to it. So suddenly this thing has meaning. So for me, I kind of let myself be awash of the fact that this universe is infinite and I am infinitely small against it, and my life and my pursuits are infinitely small, but I'm conscious, I care about them. And so I start to kind of reinvigorate that caring into my day-to-day once I've started being, again, disciplined to achieving things against those results.
I think that can be called resilience too, right? Like building up your resilience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything that you do in the short term to try and deal with the immediate concerns when you start to recognize burnout? Maybe some people go for a run, some people meditate, anything like that you do to try and just get through the short-term periods?
Yeah, a few things. I love to be outside. So being out, I just find a way to be outside. Vicky, before we started recording, you were making fun of me for my love of Colorado and my lording that over everyone. But moving to Colorado was a huge thing for me. I lived in Tahoe for a little while. That was probably the only. Being like.
Wait. Your video paused out for a minute.
Oh, gotcha.
All right,
let's do it again. Something profound too.
What's that?
It was.
I said, I'm sure it was something profound, and the video froze.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, so, moving to Colorado was big for me. Being able to be outdoors. I'm less than 7 miles from a mountain that I can go walk up and listen to Boulder Creek and have those things and kind of take in the just everything and energize that way. That's a huge one. I mountain bike, which is actually dangerous for me because I did the math, and I think out of every 5 times I'm down 3.8 times. I broke my ribs last year. Not always the smartest thing. Pain definitely reminds you of
you're
that.
Supposed to wear a helmet,
Are you popping wheelies on those? Are you popping wheelies on those mountains, or taking your hands off the handlebars? Like, what's going on?
It's gravel and it's technical, and we get winds here. So, we just had 100+ mile an hour gusts with 50+ mile an hour sustained wind, which would be, still lived in Florida, a tropical storm. And one of the days I went out riding in that, which isn't smart. And when the wind got behind me, I slammed into the gravel, and that was painful. But it still is. It's still things like that, getting outdoors, getting some physical activity, even if it's something like, I think one of the things that's become a ritual for me is going to the steam room every day. It sounds a little hoity-toity, but our gym has a steam room, and I go and I sit in there for, started out for about 7 minutes. Now I'll get up to about half an hour, and sitting in that quiet and the noise and 200-degree weather or temperature definitely gives you a moment to think, and for me it invigorates me. I'm still a gamer, but I will say, you mentioned earlier, what are some ways to that you notice it when a video games feels like too much of a commitment for me. That's when I know I'm feeling a little bit of burnout and fatigue. And what I end up doing is I end up going and playing with my kids. Like I play a dumber game with them instead of sitting and playing Halo or Diablo or something that's going to require me to take that time. I'll go and play Fortnite or Roblox or something for a few hours with the kids, because the kids definitely help offset the burnout. It's hard to be there, but hard to be disengaged when they're around.
Yeah, I tell you, being a parent who has a kid, I obviously, you've got me outnumbered, Callen. You have two boys. I've got one boy, and I realize sometimes at night when he's taking a bath or whatever, and I'm putting him to sleep, and I have my phone up because I'm answering IMs, that it's not setting a very good example for how I want him to perceive me as his mother. And I wonder if you ever have moments like that too, where you catch yourself and you're like, this is something that I don't want my kids to, I don't want to pass down to them. Right. It's like, this is how life is, because you're important. What we do is very important. It's very important for the industry. It's very important for the small to medium size economies on a global scale. However, you are also a father, right? So how do you balance that aspect of your life?
With a lot of planning and you're right, being present. I've been, my kids are starting to get old enough to where they'll call me out on it. I had a 3-hour meeting from, we normally watch Dragon Ball Z every night. We started from Dragon Ball and worked all the way through. Something I did when I was, about their age, grew up with it, and somehow they've developed a love for it as well. And like I have 2 nights where I have late meetings because I have the overseas team, and when I have those nights, it frustrates them, because we don't get that ritual and that they're used to, and they call me out on it. But I think that goes back to I have to focus on being present. And you're right, we are important. There were times where I have a customer that has something down that they're trying to go bill, and I need to go fix something. Or I have a customer that's in the process of trying to evaluate whether or not they should let go of an employee, and they're using my data to do that, or things like that. And they need my help. And I'm also the CISO here, so I have security concerns, and I'm dealing with a lot of data. So we're a good target. And so there are times where I have to be available, which is basically all the time. And so I've established, I wouldn't call it blocked off time, but time during the day that I will spend and see them no matter what. And I will try and put the phone away, keep it away, and just go on do not disturb, and realize that, this kind of goes back to that absurdism and the nihilism. Like, what matters are the things that I assign meaning to. And I assign meaning to my children over everything else. The reason I work the way that I work, the reason I care about what I'm doing, is because I grew up like so incredibly poor. It's not even funny. I'm lucky. I will say I'm lucky. I was born a white male in the United States, so that gives me like on the rung of easiness. Like even living out of cars and with other people, like it was easier for me to have some social mobility and economic mobility than just about anywhere else in the world. Right. So I don't take that for granted, but I came from an area where, it's government cheese and not knowing where your next meal is coming from. And for me, I want to leave a legacy in my kids that they don't have to worry about those things. So that's a lot of the reason I work the way that I work, and I drive the way that I drive. And it's a lot of my fire. But I have to remember that it being for them means I have to be there for them as well. And so I try and balance it in both things. And I'm actually really transparent with them in that I'm doing these things so that you can do the things that you want to do. I'm going to make sure I have the time for you. But I probably have, and maybe it was the fact that we went through the cancers and the things we did, I probably have a more honest relationship with my 7 and 11-year-old than most people would, because they've had to experience adult things. So we have adult conversations. I still shield them and try and go through, but they kind of understand, I think, better than a lot of kids that age.
Yeah. One of the things I think was really helpful for me as a kid, because I was an only child and my parents were both like newspaper journalists. So they were always at the Capitol covering the legislative sessions and stuff like that. And what was really cool for me that I still remember as a kid is being involved, like going there and watching the action happen, and going to the Capitol and watching the reporters rush out when the session ended. There's just so much that you tie back to. Again, like your parents are like the ones that help you to establish your moral fabric, right? Of how to like interact in society. There's a lot of other things that do that, but I would say, like, for the technology realm, what's some advice that you would give to our listeners on how to really engage and incorporate maybe their kids into their conversations and what they do?
Yeah, I think it is that honesty and practicing it, but it's, like I don't love radical candor because I think it's given a lot of jerks the ability to say, oh no, I just practice radical candor. And they don't read the fact that they didn't even read the book. They maybe didn't even read the footnotes. They just heard I can be brutally honest with everyone, and that's the right way to be. But when you actually read through that book, you realize it says it has to come from a place of love, right? And we love our kids. So I am very transparent and open with my kids, but in my lovingness, I realize that I still have to do it in a way that they can receive it, right? It's not like I don't go, Dad's got to answer these things because it means money, and money makes it so that you're not going to be poor like I was, right? I move it into a message that they understand, and I do incorporate and bring them. Landon still talks about the ConnectWise take your kid to work days, right? Like Corbin still thinks I work at ConnectWise. My youngest still thinks I work at ConnectWise, and he's someday going to work at ConnectWise. Like he says it all the time. And so they were so ingrained into something that was important to me, which was growing the career for myself and for them, and incorporating them into that process has been big for them in the ways that they could be part of it. And I think that you said it right in that, like, you got to go with, I try and make them go with, but kids are so perceptive. They perceive it all. Most of the time when I come and have a conversation with them, their understanding is far beyond it, and their observations are far beyond anything that I would have expected them to already have. And I think we do our children a disservice by trying to overly shelter them, because what it does is what happens when we don't have all the information, we start to create narratives in our own head. And our kids do that too. They think that this is happening because I did this is happening because of this. And if you don't sit down and explain it to them or incorporate them into the process, they could think that, oh, Dad's tired because I'm always asking him to play with me. Not Dad's tired because it's the end of the quarter and we had a security concern, and this customer that's really large wants something special and I've got to go do that thing. And not because I spent 8 out of 13 weeks on the road. It's because I've wanted to go play soccer. I wanted to go rock climbing. I wanted to X, Y, Z. And sitting down and explaining and incorporating them in, they understand it. They just don't, they need all the information. So that's what I try and do, is give them information in a way that they can consume it, and in a way that they can form their own complete opinion.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for a second, put yourself in the shoes or the mindset of an employee, right? And if you start to see that, how do you have that conversation with your boss or your manager or whoever in the organization that you need to deal with this burnout before you end up leaving the company, right? Like, what does that conversation look like? That can be a difficult thing if you start to realize that, and you might be afraid that your job is going to be in jeopardy or that you won't get salary or promotions for thinking that way. What do you say? What would you tell to someone who's feeling that?
It's funny because I actually have a lot of experience at that. Before I joined the team, we had problems in our culture because we drove as fast, and there was a pretty toxic leader that's now gone. He's gone pretty quick after I joined because I learned the way that he was treating people. And there was a culture of fear in some areas that took me probably 4 to 6 months to route out here. My current head of sales, Vicky knows him, Moses, went through a pretty challenging startup journey. VC funded. They spent the funds wrong. They over promoted people. They followed people around, and he actually ended up taking two months off, and it did hurt him when he was trying to go find another job because he was transparent about it. And so what I do is when I have my one-on-ones with my direct reports, and what I try and drive down, and I am going to take it from the employee's perspective as well in a second, but what I do is I have to try and build an organization that promotes that safety, that makes them understand that one-on-ones aren't for them, that are for them. They're not for me, right? It's not for me to dictate things that are down. A one-on-one that I have with my reports, and even the reports that I have below there, is for that employee, and it should be a safe space to share those things. And so as an employee, it is scary, but I would say you have to be transparent, you have to be open, you have to find a relationship with risk that allows you to understand that you are contributing to the company in a way that they need you to do that, and then you have to share it, and you have to take that risk, because the reality is the end result's going to be the same. If you suffer from burnout and your performance suffers, if you take work off that you weren't expecting to and it happens suddenly, now you've put your employer, you've put your work in a worse position, and they're probably going to take action, because again, going back to what I said with the kids, they don't have the complete picture. They don't have all of the information, and you're forcing them to make, and if they're not a good manager, if there's somebody that you should be afraid of in sharing this information, or if it's not a good culture, then they're going to make assumptions about you as a person and your abilities, and those assumptions will actually carry through to a recommendation at the next job. They'll carry through to talks with other leaders. They'll carry through to their network, because they're going to complain about this employee that's just not getting it anymore, that they're just not there. If you take ownership and you take that risk on, and you go have that conversation, and even if you aren't in the safe kind of environment that I'm trying to create in that side, you're taking control of your kind of own destiny, and you're taking control of the narrative. So if they do say, well, we don't want to deal with someone, we're overlooking, oh, this person may in the future be someone that burns out again, then at least at that point you can part on terms that are your own, and you can craft that, because that person may say, yeah, they left because they couldn't hack it. But it's like, well, now I know that. Now I have some control over that. And for me, it does come back down to some of that discipline too, of being in control of your own. It's hard to take personal responsibility, because it is a personal thing. It could be partially at the fault of the employer. I'll tell you, there was a situation where I ended up losing someone because he was afraid of it. We had about 700 tickets that had been hidden by the previous leader of that area, and he was continuing to hide those tickets, and he never warned me that people were having burnout, and I lost a few people that I could have helped. The people that I was able to engage with, the people that told me that, some of them, I realized that they were burnt out because they really didn't care, and we did find a way of amicably separating. Some of them are my best people now. So it really does come down to trusting yourself and trying to make sure that you're still owning and controlling your own narrative.
Did you mention that you also do skip level meetings with not just your direct reports, but maybe the people that report to your direct reports?
We do, and it's a critical way of not losing touch with the organization. It's something that's foreign to a lot of leaders. I've actually had a couple executives struggle and one of them leave over the fact that they felt that they were being tattled on, or feeling like that they couldn't deal with it, and it's a very foreign thing for a lot of people. So it's something you have to do with purpose. And part of the reason they felt that was because it wasn't done completely. It was just, they were in the culture of the company, and suddenly you've got CEO, president talking to their people, and it felt very, very that way. So if you do skip level, if you do these types of things, you have to make sure it's done in the daylight, right? It can't feel like you're on a witch hunt, or you're building that, because then that also affects what the people say, because they're afraid of it.
Yeah, that's. I wanted to circle back to that, because I know that is something that Sunny Kayla from IT by Design, he and his wife Cam talk about skip levels a lot, and I do skip levels, or I used to do skip levels at ConnectWise, and I think it's really helpful because you get reciprocation on both sides as an executive leader or somebody within your company, where you do have people that are reporting to your direct reports, like managers and stuff, or middle management. It really does help you to understand what's happening at all layers of your company. And then if you're working on the front lines of supporting that company, maybe this, hey, could help with burnout, because now you're finding a purpose because you've got the leaders of your organization that really do care about what you're doing, right? Because they're showing up and they're showing you, not just telling you that they care and that they're listening to you to try to make it the best company possible.
I mean, I'll tell you, like when I was at ConnectWise, my last role, I reported to Tony Thomas, and you reported to Jason McGee. And some of the most helpful times were the fact that Jason had the door open. I mean, busy guy is an understatement, right? And
Yeah.
every time I walked by, I got it was often impromptu, but hey, everything going okay? How's it going? Like, sit down, talk, find time. And that was incredibly helpful in avoiding burnout when we were trying to do some audacious things. So I agree.
All right. Matt, do we have any other questions? I feel like I could talk about this for forever, because it sounds like we've got, there's so many different ways that we've been talking about this, right? Like setting expectations for yourself when you're getting into a role, so that way you're helping to avoid burnout. Being able to leverage your personal relationships and the relationships with your family to really kind of set those expectations with them, right? So that way you're really kind of going into it with transparency. Also with the people that work for you within your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like there's a lot of parallels that we're talking about here, which is pretty cool.
This is really resonating. For myself, I got so burned out in my last organization that I left the MSP practitioner space completely and went into vendor space, right? It really can get to you.
Yeah.
It can make you feel like you're losing yourself when you have that, because you're used to a certain drive, you're used to certain achievements and things like that, and you really can feel like it. And sometimes it's externalities that are outside your control, and sometimes it's an internal. Sometimes we change, and sometimes it's just that there's too much going on, and trying to figure out what's okay to let go of. And I think I mentioned it briefly, but when everything's important, nothing is important. And I think that's something that we have to remind ourselves, that there are things that are more important than other things. And I think you're spot on with that side.
So another question for you. This is something that Matt and I are standardizing across all of these amazing interviews that we're doing within the community. If there was one habit that you'd want to leave listeners with today, what would that one habit be? Or what would the habit be that they should break?
Oh, that's a dichotomy there. That's fun to think through. I think the best habit, and it's one that in the IT industry, we're always trying to find a way to achieve the result that we're trying to get to. I think that one of the best habits that I'm still working on learning and still working on practicing is utilizing the word no. We as those of us that are helpful, those of us that are problem solvers, which is pretty much the entire industry, we want to solve the problem. And so we say yes, we take on a lot of stuff. And that can lead to burnout. That can lead to frustrations. It can lead to feeling taken advantage of. And in the idea of keeping with the theme, I would say learning how to say no. Like it doesn't mean that you just shut someone down and say, I'm not going to do that, or no, I've got too much. It means that you embark on a journey of asking more questions. Sometimes you say, okay, I can't do that, or it's not in the priority list, but what are you trying to achieve? Can I help get you to where you need to be? Is there a solution we can find? Is there a solution we can find down the road? But being able to actually say no is a huge, huge thing. And I would say no is a complete sentence, but no also starts a new sentence when we learn to say no in our place of employment or our companies or in our personal lives. I would say that's that's one that I'm still working on, and I want to continue to work on.
So no
I
with
think all of us
context.
Yep. No with context. Sometimes there is no context. Sometimes it's just no. But learn how to use no.
Oh, that's perfect. I agree completely. And for me, that's what led to burnout, right? Never ever saying no to a request, and next thing you know, you're working 24 hours.
Yep.
I mean, I'm still learning that one too. Let's be honest. I think this is a topic all in itself that we could probably
Right?
have a whole
This could be a
series
3-hour
on.
episode.
Yeah, yeah.
Learn how to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Callen. We appreciate you coming onto our show. Matt, where do we go next?
Well, next we have a surprise guest. I don't think we have the next one decided yet, so we'll have to edit out where I just said we have no idea.
And until then, remember that every day is a chance to learn something new. Bye, everyone.